last resort.
No, please!
The woman who wasted
You cannot
a gift
escape
on
me!
people who could not pay. But when Prince Alaric Corvath destroyed 47 rooms in 6 weeks, when 7 royal healers fled with broken bones and shattered pride, King Obsidian had no choice left. He summoned Thessa Mordain, the 8th healer. The final chance. In 18 days, she would transform a weapon into a sculptor, a monster into a man. This is how a prince learned that true power is not found in destruction, but in choosing what to create from the ruins. 6 weeks after his royal ascension, Alaric Corvath knew only one truth. He was drowning in sound. The iron radiator crashed against the marble floor for the 17th time. Sparks showered across the ruined carpet. The impact reverberated through the stone foundation of the castle, a percussion that Alaric could feel in his teeth, his bones, the hollow spaces between his ribs. He needed it louder, always louder, loud enough to drown out everything else. His hands closed around the twisted metal again. The surface was still hot from the steam pipes it had torn away from. Third-degree burns bubbled across his palms. They healed before he could register the pain. Vampire physiology, efficient and merciless. He raised the radiator above his head, brought it down. The marble cracked. Better, louder, but not loud enough. Through the destruction, through the screaming protest of metal against stone, he could still hear them. The rats scratching inside the walls 3 floors below. The stable boy whistling in the courtyard 200 yards away. The cook's assistant dropping a ladle in the kitchen, the metallic clang like a bell inside Alaric's skull. The guards outside his door, their armor scraping with each breath, a sound like knives dragging across his awareness. And beneath it all, the worst sound, his own heartbeat, relentless, deafening. Each pulse a hammer strike against the inside of his consciousness. 6 weeks ago, he had been normal as any vampire prince could be. He heard what he needed to hear, saw what he needed to see, controlled his strength with the ease of centuries of bloodline training, even though he had only 23 years behind him. Then came the royal ascension, the ritual that would unlock his full power, transform him from prince to heir. His father, King Obsidian Corvath, had insisted. The kingdom needed a strong successor. The ritual could not wait for the traditional century of preparation. It had to be now. Alaric had trusted him. The ritual had worked. Oh, it had worked spectacularly. Every sense that normally took decades to develop had exploded into being all at once. Hearing that could detect a heartbeat 5 miles away. Vision that saw in spectrums mortals could not imagine. Strength that could pulverize granite with a casual grip. Speed that made the world move like honey, but none of the control, none of the filters that made those gifts bearable. The world had become a screaming, blazing assault. Every sound at maximum volume, every scent overwhelming, every texture like sandpaper against exposed nerves. The moonlight through his windows felt like acid on his skin. The whisper of fabric against fabric was a roar. The taste of the air told him what everyone in the castle had eaten for breakfast, and the information crashed into his brain whether he wanted it or not. He could not turn it off, could not lower the volume, could not close his eyes to any of it. So he destroyed things. Because the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass was large enough, violent enough, immediate enough to occupy his entire awareness. For a few precious seconds, breaking something gave him a single point of focus. One sound he controlled, one action he chose. It was the only quiet he knew anymore. The radiator hit the floor again. A chunk of marble broke free. Alaric picked it up, hurled it at the tall windows. The glass exploded outward in a glittering cascade. Cold night air rushed in. He could feel each individual molecule against his skin. Somewhere beyond the door, someone was approaching. Heavy footsteps, the distinctive rhythm of his father's gait. Alaric did not need to hear it. He could smell the old blood, centuries soaked into expensive fabric. Could feel the displacement of air as a bottom moved through the corridor. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Did not enter. A voice soft and terrible. More vibration than sound. King Obsidian did not need to raise his voice to be heard. 7 healers have tried Alaric. 7 healers have fled this castle with injuries that will mark them for life. You have destroyed 47 rooms. The servants are too frightened to approach your wing. The council whispers that you are mad. Alaric said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tightly he thought his teeth might crack. He could hear his father's heart. Slow, steady, ancient. There was something wrong with the rhythm. A skip every 3rd beat. His father was dying, had been dying for months. That was why the ascension could not wait, why Alaric's suffering did not matter. An heir was required. Functional or broken did not matter as long as he could hold a throne. I have summoned one more healer, King Obsidian continued. The words held no warmth, only cold calculation. She arrives tomorrow. Her name is Thessa Mordain. She is your final chance, my son. Prove you can be controlled, or I will have no choice. The Blood Moon Council convenes in 18 days. If you cannot sit through that gathering there without killing someone, you are worthless to me, and worthless things do not survive in my kingdom. The footsteps retreated. Alaric stood alone in the ruins, hands clenched around nothing, his father's words echoing louder than any destruction he could create. 18 days. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Claws had descended without his permission, gleaming black talons that could shred steel. He had not willed them, could not retract them. His body no longer obeyed him. It simply reacted to the overwhelming input, every stimulus triggering a response he could not control. Alaric Corvath closed his eyes. It did not help. He could still see everything, the heat signatures of bodies throughout the castle burning red behind his eyelids. He lowered himself to the floor, curled inward, and pressed his palms against his ears, as if that could block out the sound of the world slowly driving him mad. It could not. It never could. Dawn came. Alaric did not sleep. Vampires rarely needed to, but he used to enjoy it. The quiet of unconsciousness. The break from thinking. Now sleep was impossible. His mind would not stop processing the infinite data pouring in. Even closing his eyes was useless. He saw heat, saw movement, saw through walls if he concentrated, though he never wanted to. The servants came at first light. He heard them in the hallway drawing lots to see who would have to enter. A young maid lost. She was crying before she even touched the door handle. Her heart raced so fast Alaric thought it might burst. He did not want to frighten her. But everything about him was frightening now. His eyes bled between human hazel and predatory crimson, without his control. His fangs descended at random. His hands had not stopped shaking in 3 days. The door opened a crack. The maid did not step inside. She simply shoved a tray of food across the threshold and ran. The silver tray scraped against the stone floor. The sound drove straight through Alaric's temples like a spike. He did not eat, had not eaten in 4 days. He could smell the food from across the room, every ingredient, every spice, and the information made him want to vomit. His body was surviving on pure vampiric biology, burning through his own reserves. He was losing weight he could not afford to lose. By mid-morning, guards came to clear the room. They worked quickly, silently, keeping as much distance as possible. They did not try to repair anything. They simply removed the largest debris and left. The room looked like a battlefield. Gouges in the walls. Shattered furniture pushed into corners. The expensive Renaissance frescoes on the ceiling ruined, torn by something sharp. Alaric did not remember doing that. He sat in the center of the devastation and waited. The 8th healer, Tessa Mordain. He did not know why she would be different. The previous 7 had tried everything. Sedation spells that made him feel like he was suffocating. Silver chains that burned through to bone. Silencing enchantments that had felt like acid being poured into his ears. All of them had treated him like a rabid animal that needed to be muzzled. Restrained, controlled. None of them had asked him what was wrong. The sun climbed higher. Alaric tracked its movement through the window he had shattered. He could feel the lights shifting, changing temperature. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it was agony. Every ray held information. Particles. Spectrums. His brain tried to categorize all of it and could not keep up. A clock somewhere in the castle chimed noon. Alaric screamed. The sound that came from him was not human, not even vampire. It was pure animal anguish, a frequency that shattered what remained of the window glass. He clapped his hands over his ears, curled into himself, tried to make himself smaller, quieter, less aware. It did not work. It never worked. He did not hear the footsteps approaching, did not register the presence until she was already there standing in his doorway. His senses were so overwhelmed that one more person barely registered against the chaos. When he finally looked up, he saw her. A woman, mortal, young, perhaps late 20s. She wore simple gray wool, practical and worn soft from years of use. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid. No jewelry, no ornament, nothing that would catch light or make sound. She carried a canvas satchel across one shoulder, heavy with supplies. Her face was calm, not frightened, not pitying, just observant. She was the first person in 6 weeks who had looked at him and not immediately stepped backward. Tessa Mordain did not speak. She stepped over the threshold, her boots crunching on broken glass, and slowly lowered her satchel to the floor. The sound was soft, deliberate. She was being careful. Not for herself, for him. Alaric stared at her. His breathing was ragged, desperate. Vampires did not need to breathe, which meant this was purely psychological. A panic attack. He was having a panic attack and he could not stop it. The woman knelt, placed her hands on her knees, waited. Leave, Alaric rasped. His voice was destroyed from screaming. I will hurt you. I cannot control it. Leave." She did not move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with the clinical detachment of someone who had seen suffering before and was not afraid of it. "My name is Tessa Mordain," she said quietly. Her voice was low even. Not a whisper, but not loud. The volume felt careful, considered. "I am a healer. I do not use restraints. I do not use sedation. I listen first." Alaric's laugh was bitter. "7 healers before you tried to fix me. All of them failed. What makes you different?" "The others tried to suppress your power," Thessa replied. "I am not here to suppress anything. I am here to understand what you are experiencing. Then we will find a way to help you live with it." She stood slowly, took one step forward. Alaric flinched violently. The movement sent a fresh wave of sensory input crashing through him. The air displacement, the scent of clean soap and medicinal herbs on her skin, the steady, inexplicable calm of her heartbeat. "Stop," he choked out. "Do not come closer. I can hear your blood. I can feel your pulse. If you move too fast, I will react. I will not mean to, but I will hurt you." Thessa paused. "Then I will move slowly." She did. Each step was deliberate, measured. She crossed the room at a glacial pace, her boots clicking softly against the broken marble. Alaric watched her approach with the frozen terror of someone watching a slow-motion catastrophe. His instincts screamed at him to strike, to defend, to remove the threat. But she was not a threat. She was just a woman, a healer, someone trying to help. He held himself perfectly still. Thessa stopped 3 feet away, close enough to speak without raising her voice, far enough that he did not feel cornered. She lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the floor, placing herself at his eye level. "Tell me what you hear right now," she said. The question was so unexpected that Alaric actually answered. "Everything. I hear everything." "Be specific." He closed his eyes. The information poured in regardless. "The guards outside the door. One of them has a chest cold. His breathing rattles. The other is nervous. His armor is shifting because he cannot stand still. There are mice in the walls 3 floors below. The kitchen staff is preparing lunch. I can hear the knives on cutting boards. Hear the fire crackling. Hear conversations I do not want to hear." He opened his eyes, looked at Thessa. "And you, your heartbeat, steady, 72 beats per minute. You are not afraid. You should be afraid." "Why?" Thessa asked. "Because you could hurt me, or because no one has ever been calm around you." The words hit something deep. Alaric stared at her. "Both." She nodded slowly. "I worked in field hospitals during supernatural conflicts. I have treated werewolves in full frenzy, vampires who had not fed in weeks, warlocks with magic poisoning that made them hallucinate enemies everywhere. I learned that panic is contagious. If I am afraid, my patients become more afraid. If I am calm, sometimes they can borrow that calm, even for a moment." "This is not the same," Alaric said. His voice cracked. "This is not temporary. This is my new reality. I cannot turn it off. I cannot make it stop. And I am so tired." The last word broke him. Tears spilled down his face before he could stop them. 6 weeks of holding on, fighting, pretending he could survive this. All of it crumbled. "I know," Thessa said softly. "I can see it. You have been fighting alone for too long." Alaric wiped at his face. The tears felt like they were burning. Everything felt like burning. "My father demanded the ascension. He said the kingdom needed a strong heir. He did not mention it would destroy me." Something shifted in Thessa's expression. Not pity, something colder. "How long has your father been dying?" Alaric's head snapped up. "How did you buck him?" "I can hear his heartbeat from here," Thessa said. "It skips. An old curse wound, if I had to guess. He needed you functional quickly, did not he, before the sickness takes him?" The truth settled between them like a stone. Alaric had known. On some level, he had always known. His father did not care about his suffering, only about the continuation of the bloodline, the stability of the throne. "I am a tool to him," Alaric whispered. "Nothing more." "Then let us make sure you are more than a tool," Thessa replied. She reached into her satchel, pulled out a leather journal. "For the next 2 days, I'm going to observe. I will take notes. I will ask questions. I am not going to try to fix you yet, because I do not understand what is broken. Is that acceptable?" It was the first time anyone had asked his permission for anything in 6 weeks. Alaric nodded. He did not trust his voice. Thessa opened her journal and began to write. She did not flinch when he stood abruptly and began pacing. Did not react when he punched the wall hard enough to crack the stone. She just watched, observed, recorded. For 2 days she was simply there, a steady presence in the chaos. She did not try to touch him, did not offer false comfort. She asked careful questions and listened to rambling, desperate answers. She watched how he moved, how he reacted to different stimuli, what made the sensory overload worse. On the third day, Thessa left the room for several hours. Alaric felt her absence like a missing piece. The room was too loud without her heartbeat to focus on. He destroyed another wardrobe just to fill the silence. When she returned, she was covered in dust and carrying something heavy. "I need to show you something," she said. "It will require trust." Alaric laughed bitterly. "I barely trust myself. Why would I trust you?" "Because I have not lied to you yet," Thessa answered, "and I am not going to start now." She set her burden down on the only intact table in the room. It was wrapped in burlap and tied with rough rope. She began to unwrap it, her movements deliberate. "I spent this morning in the catacombs beneath the castle," she said. "There is an underground river down there. Very old, very deep. The water is freezing and the magic is strange. Ancient. It is a place even vampires avoid." "Why would you go there?" Alaric asked. "Because I was looking for this." She pulled the burlap away. Beneath it was a slab of clay. Black as midnight, dense and heavy, it smelled of deep earth, of minerals, of something primal and silent. Thessa placed her hand on the surface. "My grandmother was a folk healer. She used earth magic when nothing else worked. Clay like this from deep rivers has a property. It absorbs vibrations, magic, energy. It takes in what you give it and holds it without breaking." She looked up at Alaric. "The other healers tried to suppress your power. I think we should try something else. Give your power somewhere to go, somewhere that can handle it." Alaric stared at the black clay. "You want me to touch it? I want you to try to break it." He moved closer. The clay was cold. He could feel the chill radiating from it, even at a distance. It was strange, solid, heavy, real in a way that nothing else had felt in weeks. "If I hurt you," he started. "You will not," Thessa interrupted, "because you have been holding back with me this entire time. You could have hurt me at any moment. You chose not to. That choice still exists." Alaric looked at his hands. They were shaking again, claws fully extended. He had not been able to retract them in 4 days. Slowly, carefully, he reached toward the clay. The moment his fingers touched the surface, the world stopped screaming. It was not silence, not truly. He could still hear everything. The guards, the mice, the distant conversations. But the volume dropped. Not to nothing, just to bearable. As if someone had finally mercifully turned down the dial that had been maxed out for 6 weeks. Alaric gasped. The sound that escaped him was half sob, half laugh. His hands sank into the clay. It was cold, dense, resistant. When he pushed it, yielded but slowly. Not like flesh that tore, not like wood that splintered. It just compressed, thick and stubborn, absorbing the pressure without breaking. "Push harder," Thessa said quietly. He did, applied enough force to shatter granite. The clay simply compressed further, swallowed his strength without complaint, gave him resistance without destruction. For 10 seconds, Alaric experienced something he had not felt since the ascension. Peace. Not silence, not emptiness. Just the manageable presence of the world filtered through the simple act of pushing his hands into cold, heavy earth. 10 seconds. Then the door burst open. Guards flooded in, weapons drawn. Behind them, a woman in pristine white medical robes. Her silver hair was pulled back severely. Her face was sharp, beautiful, and utterly cold. Dr. Seraphine Vex, Guildmaster of the Royal Medical Council, former mentor to half the healers in the kingdom, and Thessa's personal nightmare. "Step away from the prince," Seraphine commanded. Her voice carried the weight of authority. 3 decades of power and prestige. Immediately, Thessa stood slowly, placing herself between Seraphine and Alaric. "He is stable. I am treating him." "Treating him," Seraphine laughed. It was not a kind sound. "With dirt, with crude folk magic, Thessa, I taught you better than this. Or I tried to, before you decided your talents were better spent on charity cases who could not pay." Alaric pulled his hands from the clay reluctantly. The moment his contact broke, the world roared back to full volume. He staggered, overwhelmed again. Thessa reached out instinctively to steady him. Her hand on his arm was the only point of focus he had. "She is helping," Alaric growled. The words came out more animal than human, more than anyone else has. Seraphine's gaze swept over him with clinical detachment. "My prince, you have been deceived. Miss Mordain has no formal credentials, no guild approval. She practices primitive techniques that have been outdated for centuries. I have brought a delegation from the medical council. We are here to ensure proper care." Behind her, 5 physicians entered, all wearing guild whites, all carrying cases of instruments that gleamed silver in the light. Thessa's spine straightened. Alaric could feel the tension radiating from her even through his overwhelming senses. This was a threat, a power play. Dr. Vex, Thessa said, her voice carefully controlled. I request permission to continue my treatment. The prince is responding well. You request, Seraphine stepped closer. You who could not even gain guild membership, who was rejected 3 times. You think yourself qualified to treat the heir to the vampire throne. The words hung in the air. Alaric looked between them, pieces clicking together. This was personal. This was old history wrapped in professional courtesy but razor-sharp beneath. I was rejected, Thessa said quietly, because you blocked my applications 3 times, because you could not tolerate a student who questioned your methods. Seraphine smiled. It was a predator's expression. I blocked your applications because you were mediocre, because you wasted your education on bleeding hearts and sob stories, because you would rather give free care to worthless mortals than build a real practice. I saved the guild from the embarrassment of your eventual failure. Alaric watched Thessa's jaw tighten, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, but her voice remained level when she spoke. I understand. You have made your position clear. May I ask what you intend to do? I intend, Seraphine said, turning to face King Obsidian, who had appeared in the doorway, to formally request Miss Mordane's removal from this case. She is unqualified, she is using unapproved methods, and she poses a danger to the prince. King Obsidian surveyed the room. His ancient eyes moved from his son, still trembling and barely stable, to the black clay on the table, to Thessa, standing defiant, to Seraphine, radiating cold authority. Dr. Vex, the king said slowly, 7 guild-approved healers have failed. My son has destroyed 47 rooms. He cannot sleep, can barely function. You are telling me that the first healer to show any progress should be removed. She is using crude magic, Your Majesty. Folk healing. Unproven, dangerous. She is the only one who has made him stop screaming, Alaric interrupted. His voice was raw, desperate. She is the only one who listened before trying to fix me. If you remove her, I will destroy this entire wing of the castle. I will make the last 6 weeks look like restraint. The threat hung in the air. King Obsidian regarded his son with unreadable eyes. Very well, the king said finally. Thessa Mordane, you will continue your treatment, but you have 12 days. The Blood Moon Council convenes in 18 total. If my son cannot sit through that gathering with control and dignity, you both die. Fail, and I will bury you beneath the foundation stones of this castle. Do you understand? Thessa did not hesitate. Yes, Your Majesty. As for you, Doctor, Vex, King Obsidian continued, you and your delegation will remain at the castle. Observe if you wish, but do not interfere. If the unqualified folk healer succeeds where 7 of your best failed, perhaps the guild should reconsider what qualifies as proper medicine. The dismissal was clear. Seraphine's expression did not change, but Alaric could hear her heartbeat spike. Fury barely contained beneath professional courtesy. As you wish, Your Majesty, she said. Then she turned to Thessa. Oh, 12 days. I will enjoy watching you fail. The physicians filed out. Seraphine paused at the doorway. Oh, and Thessa, when this prince tears you apart in one of his fits, remember that I warned you. Some things cannot be fixed. Some people are simply broken beyond repair. She left. The door closed. Alaric and Thessa stood alone in the ruined room, the weight of 12 days pressing down on them. Thessa turned to Alaric. Her face was pale but determined. We have work to do. She will sabotage us, Alaric said. She will find a way. Probably, Thessa agreed, but we still have 12 days. And that clay, and each other. That is more than we had this morning. She walked to the table, placed her hands on the black clay. I need to bring more of this, much more. Can you hold on until I return? Alaric looked at the clay, at the only thing in 6 weeks that had given him even a moment's relief. How long will you be gone? 4 hours, maybe 5. The river is deep. 4 hours felt like an eternity, but Thessa was offering hope. Real, tangible hope for the first time since the ascension had destroyed his life. Go, Alaric said. I will survive. Thessa nodded. She picked up her satchel, started toward the door, then paused. Alaric, he looked up. You are not broken beyond repair, she said quietly. You are adjusting to something no one should have to adjust to alone. That is not weakness. That is just unfair. She left before he could respond. Alaric stood in the center of his destroyed chamber, hands trembling, the world screaming around him. But somewhere in the chaos, a small voice whispered something he had not felt in weeks. Hope. Outside the door in the shadows of the corridor, Dr. Seraphine Vex stood with her lead assistant, Dr. Cassian Gray. They watched through a crack as the prince lowered himself to the floor that curled around his own knees and waited. She will fail, Seraphine said softly. The prince is a lost cause. Too much power unlocked too quickly. His mind will fracture. It is only a matter of time. Cassian shifted uncomfortably. And if she succeeds, what then? Seraphine's smile was sharp and cold. Then we will ensure everyone knows it was guild methods that saved him. Thessa will get no credit. She never does. I have made certain of that for 5 years, and I will continue to make certain of it. She humiliated me once questioning my techniques in front of the academy board. No one humiliates me twice. What if the king... The king is dying, Seraphine interrupted. Cursed wound from the war 50 years ago. I have examined him. He has months, perhaps weeks. When he dies, the new king will be young, desperate, and very easy to manipulate, especially if his healer just happens to be a guildmaster who ensures his stability. She turned away from the door. 12 days, Cassian. In 12 days, either that little charity healer fails and dies, or she succeeds and I take credit. Either way, I win. They walked away, leaving the prince alone with his suffering. 4 hours later, Thessa returned. She was soaked to the bone, covered in black mud and trembling from cold. Behind her, 2 guards carried 3 more massive slabs of clay. They deposited them in Alaric's chamber and fled immediately. Alaric stared at her. You were gone 5 hours. The river fought me, Thessa said simply. She was shivering. But I got what we needed. She had brought enough clay to build something. Not just touch, not just press hands into, enough to create. Tomorrow, Thessa said, wrapping a blanket around herself, we begin teaching you to shape instead of break, to channel instead of suppress, to make something beautiful from all that terrible power. Alaric looked at the clay, at this strange, determined woman who had walked into hell for a chance to help him, at the 12 days stretching before them like a tightrope over an abyss. Why, he asked, why risk this for me? Thessa met his eyes. Hers were dark, kind, tired, but resolute. Because 7 people gave up on you. Because your father treats you like a tool. Because everyone looks at you and sees a weapon. I look at you and see someone suffering, and I became a healer to ease suffering wherever I find it, even in princes, even in monsters. What if I am both? Alaric whispered. Then we will find a way for both to coexist, Thessa replied. She sat down on the floor, leaned against the wall, and closed her eyes. Rest if you can. Tomorrow we work. Alaric did not rest, could not. But he sat near the clay hands pressed against the cold surface, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the world felt like something he might survive. 12 days stretched before them. 12 days to transform destruction into creation. 12 days to prove that broken things could be reshaped into something whole. In the shadows beyond the door, future threats gathered. Seraphine's sabotage. His father's cold expectations. The Blood Moon Council's judgment. But for this one moment in the ruins of his chamber, Alaric allowed himself to feel the smallest flicker of possibility. He was not alone anymore, and that changed everything. Day 7 began with Alaric's hands buried in black clay, and for the first time in 7 weeks he understood what silence truly meant. Not the absence of sound, the presence of focus. The clay was cold, dense, unyielding in a way that demanded his complete attention. When he pushed, it resisted. When he pulled, it held. It required every ounce of his strength just to compress it an inch. And that requirement, that singular point of concentration, filtered the screaming chaos of the world down to something manageable. Thessa sat across from him in the pre-dawn darkness. She had not left the chamber in 4 days, had barely slept. She watched him work with the steady patience of someone who understood that healing was not a spell cast, but a skill learned. Tell me what you feel, she said quietly. Alaric's fingers dug deeper into the clay. His claws had retracted sometime during the night. He had not noticed until Thessa pointed it out. The first time in a week, his body had trusted him enough to put the weapons away. I feel the clay, he answered. His voice was rough from disuse but clearer than it had been. It is heavy, real. When I push into it, I can feel the resistance all the way up my arms, into my shoulders. It grounds me. What else? I can still hear everything, the guards, the servants, your heartbeat. But it is background now, like standing in a room with an open window. I hear the world outside, but I am not drowning in it. Thessa made a note in her journal. Good. That is progress. Now try something different, Ed. She walked to the clay slab and dragged her finger through the surface. A simple line. Clean, deliberate. Instead of pushing your strength into the clay to compress it, try shaping it. Give the energy form. Make something. Alaric stared at the line she had drawn. Make something. He had spent 7 weeks destroying everything he touched. The idea of creation felt foreign. Impossible. I do not know how, he admitted. Neither did I when I started, Thessa replied. But you learn by trying. What do you want to make? Alaric looked at his hands. They were stained black from the clay. Strong hands, dangerous hands, hands that had pulverized marble and torn iron. What could hands like his create that was not destruction? He pressed his palm flat against the clay. Slowly, carefully, he dragged it through the surface. The clay yielded, left a groove. He did it again, and again. His movements were clumsy, unpracticed, but deliberate. An hour passed, then two. Thessa did not interrupt. She simply watched as Prince Alaric Corvath, heir to the vampire throne, taught himself to shape instead of shatter. By the time the sun rose, he had created something. It was rough, abstract, a spiral that curved inward on itself, tighter and tighter, like a representation of the chaos in his mind, trying to find a center. It was not beautiful, but it was his. And he had made it without breaking anything. Thessa smiled, not the polite smile of a healer humoring a patient, a real smile, genuine and warm. That, she said, is your first sculpture. Alaric looked at the imperfect spiral. Something shifted in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to pride. It is terrible, he said. It is a beginning, Thessa corrected, and that is enough. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of clay and concentration. Alaric worked. Thessa watched. They spoke little. Words felt unnecessary when the work itself was communication enough. Day 8, he created a column, thick, sturdy, something that could bear weight. Day 9, he learned to compress the clay so tightly it became nearly stone hard. Solid enough to last. Day 10, he sculpted something that made Thessa go very still. It was small, no larger than his palm. A bird. The details were crude, the proportions wrong, but the intention was clear. Wings spread mid-flight, a creature made of earth learning to fly. Alaric set it carefully on the table in front of Thessa. His hands were shaking again, but not from sensory overload, from the vulnerability of offering something he had made. For you, he said. The words came out barely above a whisper. You taught me I could create. I wanted to show you was listening. Thessa picked up the clay bird with careful hands. She turned it over slowly, studying every rough edge, every imperfect curve. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me, she said. Alaric did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just watched as she placed the small bird on the windowsill where the morning light could touch it. That night, Thessa did not sleep. Alaric heard her breathing change around midnight, heard her heartbeat accelerate. She was in pain. He could smell it, the sharp, wrong scent of infection. He was across the room in an instant. Thessa was curled on her side, one hand pressed against her calf. Even in the darkness, Alaric's enhanced vision saw the problem. The splinter wound from her first day in the chamber when she had stepped on broken wood. It had seemed minor then, a small cut, nothing worth worrying about, but the ambient, dark magic that saturated the vampire castle was toxic to mortal immune systems. The wound had not healed. It had festered. Black veins spread from the gash climbing up her leg like poisoned roots. How long? Alaric demanded. His voice came out harsher than he intended. How long have you been hiding this? 3 days, Thessa admitted through gritted teeth. It is fine. I have antibiotics. Mortal medicine does not work here. Alaric knelt beside her, careful not to touch. The magic in this place turns your medications into sugar water. You are rotting, Thessa. You will be septic by morning. Her heartbeat was too fast. Thready, her skin was pale clammy. She was already in the early stages of blood poisoning. Alaric's hands clenched into fists. For 7 weeks, every instinct had screamed at him to hunt, to feed, to take what his vampire nature demanded. He had fought those instincts with everything he had channeled them into destruction instead of predation. Now kneeling beside the only person who had shown him kindness in months, those instincts roared to life. He could smell her blood, could hear it pumping weakly through corrupted veins. His fangs descended without permission. His vision bled red, every predatory drive in his body fixated on the fragile mortal in front of him. Feed, the instinct was overwhelming, ancient, irresistible. Alaric closed his eyes, forced himself to breathe, to think past the hunger. No, not feed, save. Thessa, he said, his voice was strained. I can stop the infection, but you have to trust me. She looked up at him, saw the crimson bleeding into his eyes, saw his fangs fully descended, saw him trembling with the effort of holding himself back. Tell me what you need, she whispered. My blood, Alaric said, bowing down to him. Vampire blood burns out infections in mortals. It will hurt. and it will create a bond between us. Not a thrall bond. I would never do that to you. But a connection. You will be able to sense my emotions. I will always know where you are. Is that acceptable? Thessa did not hesitate. Yes. Alaric brought his wrist to his mouth. His fangs sank deep into his own flesh. The pain was sharp, clean, grounding. Dark crimson blood welled up nearly black in the dim light. It glowed faintly pulsing with the ancient power of his bloodline. Open your mouth, he commanded. Thessa obeyed. Alaric pressed his bleeding wrist against her lips. The moment his blood touched her tongue, she choked, gasped. Her back arched as liquid fire poured down her throat. It was not painful in the way injuries were painful. It was overwhelming, like swallowing lightning. Like every cell in her body suddenly igniting with energy it was never meant to contain. Alaric held her steady as the blood worked. He watched the black veins on her leg begin to fade. Watched healthy pink return to the tissue. Watched the wound knit itself closed in real-time skin reforming as if it had never been torn. But more than the physical healing, he felt something else. A thread forming between them. Thin, fragile, but unmistakably present. An awareness of her that settled into the back of his mind like a second heartbeat. When it was over, Thessa collapsed back against the wall. She was shaking, covered in sweat, but alive. Whole. Alaric pulled his wrist away. The punctures closed instantly. He waited for the guilt, for the shame of forcing his blood into a mortal. But it did not come because he had not taken, he had given. How do you feel, he asked. Thessa looked down at her leg, at the smooth, unmarked skin where the infection had been eating her alive. Like I was on fire, and then like I was being remade. She looked up at him. I can feel you, in my chest, like a presence. Is that the bond? Yes, Alaric said quietly. I am sorry, I should have asked more clearly. Should have… Stop, Thessa interrupted. You saved my life. I do not care about the bond. I care that you chose to help me instead of hurt me, even when every instinct told you to do something else. She reached out, placed her hand over his. The touch was gentle, deliberate. The first time anyone had touched him with kindness since the ascension. Alaric stared at their joined hands, felt the warmth of her skin against his cold flesh, felt the steady, healthy pulse of her heart through the bond they now shared. Thank you, Thessa whispered. He could not find words, so he simply nodded, and for the rest of the night, they sat together in silence. The bond humming quietly between them. Two people who had been alone learning what it meant to be tethered to someone who cared. Morning came. With it came Dr. Seraphine Vex. She swept into the chamber without knocking, flanked by two guild physicians. Her silver hair was immaculate, her white robes pristine. She looked like an angel, cold, beautiful, merciless. Prince Alaric, she said, her voice dripping false concern, I have come to check on your progress. The king is anxious to hear that his son is improving. Alaric stood slowly. The clay sculptures from the past few days were scattered around the room. Evidence of work, of progress, of something other than destruction. Seraphine's gaze swept over them. Her lip curled slightly. How quaint. Art therapy. I am certain the Blood Moon Council will be very impressed when they learn the heir to the throne has been reduced to playing with mud. He has been learning control, Thessa said. She had stood as well, placing herself between Seraphine and Alaric. He can focus now, manage the sensory input. He is healing. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. And how exactly are you measuring this healing, Miss Mordain, with what credentials, with what formal diagnostic tools? With observation, with patience, with witchcraft, apparently. Seraphine interrupted. She gestured to one of her physicians. He stepped forward, holding a strange device. Crystalline, pulsing with faint light. This is a bond detector, Seraphine explained. It measures supernatural connections between beings. Thrall bonds, blood oaths, compulsions. She smiled. Let us see what you have been doing to the prince, shall we? The physician activated the device. It hummed, pulsed, then began to glow a steady crimson. Fascinating, Seraphine purred. A blood bond, fresh, less than 12 hours old. She turned to Thessa. You blood bonded the prince, without permission, without oversight. Do you understand what you have done? I was dying, Thessa said. Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. He saved my life. Or, Seraphine countered, you seduced him into creating a permanent connection that gives you influence over the future king. That sounds very much like treason, Miss Mordain. The air in the room went cold. Alaric felt his control slipping, felt the rage building in his chest. This woman, this poisonous, manipulative woman was twisting something good into something ugly. She did not seduce me, he said. Each word was clipped, controlled. I chose to save her, Question that choice and you question me. Seraphine turned to him. Her expression was perfectly sympathetic. My prince, I understand. You have been isolated, suffering. It is natural to form attachments to those who show you kindness. But this woman has violated every protocol. She has created a bond that could be exploited. For your safety and the safety of the kingdom, I must recommend her immediate removal. No, Alaric said. I am afraid you do not have a choice, Seraphine replied. I am guildmaster. I have the authority to remove any healer I deem dangerous or incompetent. And Tessa Mordain is both. She turned to her physicians. Escort Miss Mordain from the castle. Immediately. I will take over the prince's care from this point forward. The physicians moved toward Tessa. Alaric stepped between them. The movement was fast, predatory. His eyes bled fully crimson. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Touch her, he said softly, and I will remove your hands at the wrist, then your arms at the shoulder, then your head at the neck, and I will be creative about the order. The physicians froze. Seraphine's expression did not change, but Alaric heard her heartbeat spike. Fear. Finally, she was afraid. Are you threatening guild physicians in front of witnesses? Seraphine asked. That is grounds for declaring you unfit to rule. I am protecting my healer, Alaric replied, the only person in this castle who has helped me. If that makes me unfit, so be it. The standoff held, tense, violent, on the edge of bloodshed. Then a voice from the doorway, ancient and cold. What is happening in my son's chamber? King Obsidian stood at the threshold. He looked diminished, paler than usual. The sickness was progressing faster, but his presence still commanded absolute authority. Seraphine turned, composing herself instantly. Your Majesty, I have discovered that Miss Mordain has blood-bonded your son without permission. This is a serious violation. For his safety, I recommend— I know about the bond, King Obsidian interrupted. My son informed me this morning. He also explained that she was dying from dark magic poisoning, and he chose to save her. That sounds less like seduction and more like the first selfless act my son has performed in 7 weeks. He walked into the room, stopped in front of the clay sculptures, studied them with unreadable eyes. My son has not destroyed anything in 4 days, the king continued, has not screamed, has not injured anyone. For the first time since the ascension, he appears to be in control. And you want me to remove the person responsible for that progress? Seraphine's jaw tightened. She is unqualified. 7 qualified healers failed, King Obsidian said. The unqualified one is succeeding. That suggests either your guild's qualifications are meaningless or Miss Mordain is more skilled than you wish to admit. Which is it, Dr. Vex? Silence. Seraphine's hands clenched at her sides. Alaric could hear her teeth grinding together. Tessa Mordain will continue her treatment, the king declared. You and your physicians will observe if you wish, but you will not interfere. If I discover you have sabotaged her efforts, I will have you tried for treason. Am I clear? Crystal, Your Majesty, Seraphine said. Her voice was pure ice. She swept from the room. Her physicians followed. But Alaric saw the look in her eyes as she left. Calculation, fury, determination. This was not over. She would find another way. King Obsidian turned to his son. For a long moment, he simply looked at Alaric. Really looked. Perhaps for the first time in months. You made those, he asked, gesturing to the sculptures. Yes, Alaric said. They are crude, unrefined, completely lacking in technical skill. The king paused. But they are yours, and that is more than I expected you to create again. It was not praise, but it was not condemnation either. For King Obsidian, it was nearly affection. Do not fail at the Blood Moon Council, the king said. Then he left. Alaric and Tessa stood alone in the chamber. The tension slowly drained from the room. She will come after us again, Tessa said quietly. I know, Alaric replied. She wants me gone, wants to take credit for your recovery. I know. We have 8 days left, Tessa said. 8 days to make you stable enough that the council cannot question your fitness. 8 days before she finds a way to destroy everything. Alaric looked at the clay, at the sculptures, at this woman who had risked everything to help him. Then we work, he said, and we do not give her the chance. The days accelerated. Alaric worked with the clay from dawn until long past midnight. His hands grew strong. Sure, the clumsy abstract shapes evolved into something more, something deliberate. On day 13, he began the heart. It started as a simple form, a rough outline. But as the hours passed, as Tessa brought more clay, as Alaric poured every ounce of his focus into the work, it grew, expanded, became something monumental. By day 15, the sculpture dominated the chamber. 10 feet tall, An anatomically perfect human heart rendered in black clay. Every chamber visible, every vessel traced, every ventricle shaped with painstaking care. But it was not just anatomy, it was emotion made visible. The right atrium fear, the surface rough chaotic like the texture of panic. The right ventricle rage, deep gouges, sharp angles. The left atrium grief, smooth but hollow, an emptiness shaped like loss. The left ventricle, oh hope, the only chamber Alaric had polished smooth, the only part that caught the light. Thessa watched him work, saw the prince she had met 12 days ago transforming. He was still pale, still too thin, still carried the weight of sensory overload. But he was no longer drowning. He was building something from the chaos, creating beauty from suffering. Why a heart? She asked. Alaric did not stop working. His hands moved over the clay with certainty now. Because that is what you taught me. That feeling is not weakness. That emotions have form and weight and purpose. I am making them visible. So I remember. On day 15, as the sun set, Dr. Cassian Gray appeared at the door. He was Seraphine's lead assistant. A quiet man, competent but unremarkable. He looked nervous. Miss Mordain, he said quietly, may I speak with you alone? Thessa glanced at Alaric. He nodded. She followed Cassian into the corridor. What is this about? She asked. Cassian looked over his shoulder, lowered his voice. Dr. Vex is planning something. I do not know what, but she has been copying your notes, studying your methods. She had me transcribe everything you have done with the prince. Thessa's blood went cold. Why? I think, Cassian said carefully, she plans to present your method as her own, at the Blood Moon Council. If the prince succeeds, she will take credit. If he fails, you take the blame. Either way, she wins. Why are you telling me this? Cassian met her eyes. Because I became a physician to help people, not to help Seraphine destroy anyone who threatens her ego. She blocked your guild applications. Did you know all 3 times? Not because you were unqualified, because you were brilliant and she could not stand it. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. These are copies of what she has stolen, so you have proof. Do with it what you will. I am done being her accomplice. He pressed the papers into Thessa's hands and walked away quickly. Thessa stood in the corridor holding evidence of betrayal. 8 days left, and Seraphine was already positioning herself to steal everything. She returned to the chamber. Alaric took one look at her face and stopped working. What happened? Thessa told him. Everything. The stolen notes, the plan, the systematic sabotage that had followed her for 5 years. Alaric's hands slowly clenched into fists. The clay heart behind him cracked. A hairline fractured down the center. Am nobody. You are not nobody, Alaric am nobody. You are not nobody, Alaric said fiercely. You are the person who saved me, and I will not let her destroy you. Before Thessa could respond, bells began to ring. Deep, resonant, the arrival bells. Someone important had come to the castle. Alaric and Thessa moved to the window. Below in the courtyard, a carriage was arriving. Black lacquer, silver trim, the crest of the Northern Coven on the door. Lord Silas Draven stepped out. 2 days early, the ambassador had arrived. The council was supposed to convene in 8 days, but ambassadors traditionally arrived the day before. Lord Silas was early, deliberately early, and that meant something. Within the hour, a servant delivered a message. Lord Silas requested a private audience with Prince Alaric. Tonight, in the prince's chambers. It is a test, Thessa said. He is testing whether you can handle a controlled interaction before the full council. Or he is here to declare me unfit early, Alaric replied. Save everyone the trouble of a public failure. Can you handle it? Alaric looked at the clay heart, at the 8 days of work that had brought him from a screaming, destructive weapon to something resembling functional. Could he sit through a conversation with a master manipulator? Could he maintain control when every one of his senses would be screaming, I do not know, he admitted, but I do not have a choice. Lord Silas Draven entered the chamber at midnight. He was tall, elegant. His midnight blue robes were lined with silver thread that caught the lamplight. His hands were covered in rings, heavy silver rings, each one carved with intricate patterns. He surveyed the room with interest, took in the clay sculptures, the massive heart, the prince standing tense beside it. Prince Alaric, Silas said, his voice was smooth, was musical, every word perfectly modulated. I have heard interesting rumors about your recovery. Have you, Alaric replied, not a question. 7 healers failed. The 8th, and nobody with no credentials succeeds. With dirt. Silas smiled. Forgive me, but I had to see this for myself. He walked closer. Alaric's hands clenched. Every instinct screamed danger. This man was a predator. Ancient, powerful. His presence pressed against Alaric's senses like a weight. Tell me, Prince, are you truly recovered, or are we all pretending because your father is desperate? It was a direct challenge, a test of whether Alaric could respond without losing control. I am managing, Alaric said carefully. I have learned to focus, to channel instead of suppress. Interesting, Silas murmured. He began to move around the room. As he walked, his rings clicked together, soft at first, then louder. Click, click, click. The sound was deliberate, designed to irritate, to test. Alaric's jaw clenched. The clicking echoed in his skull, multiplied. Each tiny impact became a hammer blow against his concentration. Click, click, click. His vision started to blur red. His hands shook. The careful control he had built over 8 days began to crack. Then he felt it. Through the bond, Thessa's presence. Steady, calm. Her heart beat like a metronome in the chaos. Alaric closed his eyes, focused on that single point. Her heartbeat. 72 beats per minute. Constant, reliable, real. The clicking faded to background noise. Not gone, but manageable. He opened his eyes, met Silas's gaze. Was that your test? Silas stopped clicking the rings. His expression shifted to something that might have been respect. Yes, and you passed. Barely, but you passed. He walked to the clay heart, ran one finger along the smooth left ventricle. This is remarkable work for someone who was supposedly mad with sensory overload 8 days ago. I had help, Alaric said. The healer, Silas mused, the one standing very quietly in the corner, trying not to be noticed. Thessa stepped forward. I am Thessa Mordain. I know who you are, Silas replied. Dr. Vex has been very vocal about your lack of qualifications, about how you have deceived the prince, about how you should be removed before you cause permanent damage. Dr. Vex wants credit for my work, Thessa said bluntly. Silas laughed, a genuine sound. Oh, I like you. Blunt, brave, foolish. Do you know what will happen at the Blood Moon Council if the prince succeeds? Dr. Vex will claim she taught me the method, Thessa said. The guild will support her. I will be forgotten. And if he fails, I will be executed. Exactly, Silas said. He turned back to Alaric. The Northern Covens do not care about guild politics. We care about whether the future king is stable, whether he can lead, whether he will be a tyrant like his father or something different. He gestured to the clay heart. This tells me you are capable of creation, of channeling violence into art. That is promising, but I need to see more. What do you need? Alaric asked. In 7 days, the Blood Moon Council convenes. 200 of the most dangerous beings in this hemisphere will gather in one hall. Every sound, every scent, every heartbeat, pure sensory chaos. Can you survive that? I do not know, Alaric admitted. Honest? Silas said. Good. Honesty is rare in kings. He walked to the door, paused. I will see you at the council, Prince. Do try not to disappoint me. The alternative would be very messy. He left. The chamber fell silent. Alaric looked at Thessa. 7 days. 7 days, she echoed. They returned to the clay, to the work, because work was all they had left. On day 16, Alaric created small objects, a sphere that fit in his palm, a ring he could wear on his finger. Each one compressed so tightly it was nearly stone. Each one infused with his focus, his control. You cannot bring the heart to the council, Thessa said. So you bring pieces, objects you can hold when it gets overwhelming. Alaric tested the sphere, rolled it between his palms, felt the weight, the texture, the grounding presence. What if it is not enough, he asked. Then we find out together, Thessa replied. Day 17 arrived. The council was tomorrow. One more day, one final test. King Obsidian ordered a public demonstration. The courtyard, 200 witnesses. Court magicians creating deliberate sensory chaos. Alaric would have to sit through it without breaking, without screaming, without proving Seraphine right. As the sun set, Alaric stood in his chamber holding the clay sphere. Thessa stood beside him. I can do this, he said, trying to convince himself. You can, Thessa agreed. Then the bond flared. Pain, sharp and sudden. Thessa gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She staggered. Alaric caught her. What is wrong? I do not. She collapsed. Her heartbeat was wrong, stuttering, arrhythmic. Through the bond, Alaric felt it, felt the spell wrapped around her heart, squeezing, disrupting the rhythm, killing her slowly. His vision went red, not from sensory overload, from pure focused rage. Seraphine, this was Seraphine's work. The door burst open. Seraphine stood there flanked by guards. Her expression was perfectly concerned. Oh no, she said. Is Miss Mordain unwell? How tragic. And right before the demonstration, I suppose you will have to proceed without your crutch prince. Alaric looked down at Thessa, felt her heart failing through the bond, felt the connection that had saved them both being used as a weapon against them. He had a choice: lose control, prove Seraphine right, or find control even in this, even when the only person who mattered was dying in his arms. Alaric met Seraphine's eyes, saw the triumph there, the certainty that she had won, and something in him shifted, from broken weapon to sculptor to king. "Get out," he said. His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. "Get out, or what I do to you will ensure the council never convenes, because there will be no kingdom left to rule." Seraphine hesitated, saw something in his eyes that made her step back. She left, quickly. Alaric turned his attention to Thessa, to the spell killing her, to the choice between destruction and creation. He had 8 days of practice, 8 days of learning to shape instead of shatter. It was time to put that to the test. Thessa was dying in his arms, and Alaric Corvath understood what true silence meant. Not the absence of sound, the presence of a single terrible focus. Her heart was failing, and he could feel every stuttering beat through the bond they shared. The spell wrapped around her heart was elegant, vicious, a resonance frequency that disrupted the natural rhythm, turning a steady pulse into chaos. Seraphine's work, precise, designed to look like natural cardiac arrest, designed to kill slowly enough that Alaric would watch it happen. He carried Thessa to the center of the chamber, laid her gently beside the towering clay heart he had spent days creating. Her skin was pale, lips turning blue. Through the bond, he felt her terror, felt her fighting to stay conscious. "Stay with me," he commanded. Not the order of a prince, the desperate plea of someone who had finally found another person who saw him as more than a weapon. Alaric looked at his hands. They were steady, black with clay, strong enough to pulverize marble, gentle enough to sculpt birds. For 8 days, Thessa had taught him to channel violence into creation, to transform chaos into form, to shape instead of shatter. Now he would use those lessons to save her life. He moved to the massive clay heart, 10 feet of his own suffering rendered visible. Every chamber represented an emotion he had learned to contain, to give form, to control. Alaric raised his hand, drove it into the base of the sculpture. The clay was dense, compressed over days until it was nearly stone. His fingers sank in slowly. He tore away a chunk the size of his head. The sculpture cracked. A fissure ran up the center, splitting the heart he had made from foundation to apex. He did not care. This was what creation meant, making something beautiful, then sacrificing it for something that mattered more. Alaric brought his other wrist to his mouth, sank his fangs deep. The pain was sharp, clean, grounding. His blood welled up dark and luminous, pulsing with ancient power. He crushed the clay in his bleeding hand, let his blood soak into the earth, mixed them together until they formed a paste that hummed with combined magic. Earth and blood, grounding and life. Thessa's heartbeat stuttered, stopped, started again weakly. Alaric placed both hands coated in the blood-clay mixture over her sternum, closed his eyes, extended his awareness through the bond, found the spell wrapped around her heart like barbed wire, found the frequency disrupting her rhythm. "This will hurt," he whispered, "but I need you to trust me." Her eyes found his. Even dying, even terrified, she nodded. Alaric pulled. It was like extracting a physical thing. The spell resisted, clung to her heart, fed on her terror. But the clay in his hands was a grounding force. The blood was a connection. Together they gave him leverage. He wrenched the resonance spell upward, drew it through her chest, into his hands. The frequency screamed as it came free, a sound that only he could hear. It burrowed into his awareness like acid, tried to latch onto his own senses, amplify the overwhelming input until his mind shattered. Alaric spun, channeled the violent magic from his body through his arms into his clay-coated hands, slammed both palms into the center of the cracked clay heart. The sculpture absorbed the impact. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the clay heart exploded. The concussive force blew outward. Black dust filled the chamber. Shards of compressed earth embedded in the walls. The windows shattered. Alaric was thrown backward, hit the floor hard enough to crack the marble beneath him. Silence fell. Absolute. Ringing. Empty. Alaric pushed himself up. His hands were bleeding. Raw. The clay had absorbed the curse, but the backlash had torn through his palms. He did not care. He crawled through the debris, found Thessa. She was covered in black dust. Still, silent. His hands found her throat, pressed against her pulse point. Thump, thump, strong, steady, perfect. Thessa's eyes opened. She gasped, coughed, sat up slowly, clutching her chest where the spell had been killing her. You destroyed it, she whispered, looking at the ruins of the sculpture. Your heart. I will make another, Alaric said. His voice was rough, shaking. I needed you more. Thessa reached up, touched his face. Her hand came away wet. Alaric realized he was crying. Tears he had not known he was capable of anymore. Thank you, she said. He pulled her against his chest, held her while she breathed. Alive. Whole. Safe. Outside the chamber, footsteps approached. Running. King Obsidian burst through the door, guards behind him. He took in the destroyed sculpture. The blood. The clay dust coating everything. What happened? Dr. Vex tried to kill Thessa, Alaric said. He did not let go. Used a cardiac disruption spell. Timed it for right before the demonstration. So I would fail without her. A door opened down the corridor. Dr. Cassian Gray appeared. He was pale, shaking. In his hands he held documents. I have proof, Cassian said. Dr. Vex ordered me to transcribe the spell, said it was for research, but I copied everything. Logs, notes, evidence of tampering. He looked at King Obsidian. She has been sabotaging Miss Mordain for 5 years. This is attempted murder. The king's expression went cold. Ancient. Terrible. Where is Dr. Vex now? In her quarters, Cassian replied, waiting to hear if the healer died. Arrest her, King Obsidian commanded. Full royal guard. She is to be held for trial at the Blood Moon Council tomorrow night. Guards moved immediately. King Obsidian turned to his son. Are you intact? Yes, Alaric said. Is she? I am fine, Thessa answered. Alaric saved me. The king studied them, the prince holding a mortal healer. Both covered in clay and blood. Both alive against odds that should have killed them. The council convenes tomorrow at sunset, King Obsidian said. 200 witnesses. Every vampire lord in the Eastern Territories. 8 werewolf alphas. Diplomats from 3 continents. Can you sit through that gathering without breaking? Alaric looked at Thessa, at the woman who had taught him that strength was not suppression, but focus. That power was not destruction, but choice. I can, he said. We can. King Obsidian nodded once. Then he left, taking the guards, taking Cassian, leaving Alaric and Thessa alone in the ruins. We have 1 day, Thessa said. 1 day to prepare. Alaric looked at the destroyed clay heart, at the rubble that had saved her life. Then we rebuild, not the sculpture, something I can carry. They worked through the night, molded new clay spheres, compressed them until they were stone hard, each one a focus point, each one infused with the lessons of 18 days. By dawn, Alaric had 3 spheres, 1 for each pocket, solid, real, grounding. When it gets overwhelming, Thessa said, use these and use me. Through the bond, my heartbeat is always there. Alaric tested the connection, felt her steady presence in his awareness, a lighthouse in the chaos of sensation. What if Seraphine still finds a way to take credit, he asked. What if the council believes her over us? Then we prove them wrong, Thessa replied, together. The Blood Moon Council convened at sunset on the 18th day. The Grand Hall was a monument to vampire power. Obsidian tables stretching 60 feet, crystal chandeliers refracting light into fractured rainbows. Walls carved with the history of blood accords and ancient wars. The ceiling disappeared into shadow so high that even vampire eyes struggled to find the peak. And it was full. Every seat occupied by something dangerous. Alaric entered last. Tradition demanded the heir arrive after all others. He wore formal blacks, silver threading, the regalia of his bloodline. He looked like a prince, felt like a fraud. But Thessa walked 3 steps behind him, close enough that he could hear her heartbeat through the chaos, close enough that the bond thrummed steadily between them. The sound hit him like a physical wall, 200 heartbeats, some slow and ancient, some fast and mortal, breathing, fabric rustling, silverware on obsidian plates, conversations in a dozen languages, scents layering over each other until the air was thick with information. Alaric's hands clenched, the clay sphere in his right pocket pressed against his palm. Solid, real. He focused on that single point of contact. Breathe, focus, choose what to listen to. He took his seat at the right hand of King Obsidian. Thessa moved to stand in the shadows behind his chair. Not a servant, a presence, an anchor. Lord Silas Draven sat halfway down the table. He raised a glass in silent acknowledgement. Testing you, the gesture said, do not disappoint. At the far end, 8 werewolf alphas, massive, barely contained in formal clothing. Their leader, Fenris Blackmaw, watched Alaric with golden eyes that missed nothing. Werewolves respected strength, only strength. Nothing else mattered. And in the guest section, flanked by guards, Dr. Seraphine Vex. Her silver hair was still immaculate, her white robes pristine, but her hands were bound, enchanted silver manacles that prevented spellcasting. She sat perfectly still, perfectly composed, a viper waiting to strike. King Obsidian stood. The hall fell silent. "We gather for two purposes tonight," the king announced. "First, to determine if my son, Prince Alaric Corvath, is fit to serve as heir. Second, to address charges of treason against Dr. Seraphine Vex, Guildmaster of the Royal Medical Council." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was more than a simple evaluation. This was political theater. Whoever won tonight would shape the future of the kingdom. "Prince Alaric," King Obsidian continued, "you have been given 18 days to master the abilities unlocked by your royal ascension, to prove you can function in society, to demonstrate control. The council will now evaluate your progress." He gestured. Court magicians stepped forward, 10 of them, each one a master of sensory manipulation. "You will endure a controlled test," the king explained. "Sound, light, scent, designed to overwhelm. If you maintain composure for 10 minutes, you pass. If you fail, the council will declare you unfit. Do you understand?" Alaric stood, every eye in the hall focused on him, 200 predators waiting to see if the young prince would break. "I understand," he said. His voice did not shake. The magicians began. Sound first. They created frequencies that layered over each other, discordant, clashing, building until the air itself seemed to vibrate. The chandeliers trembled. Crystal sang. Alaric gripped the clay sphere, focused on its weight, texture. Let it ground him while the sound tried to drown him. Then light. The chandeliers blazed, shifted through spectrums, infrared, ultraviolet, frequencies that mortal eyes could not see, but vampire senses registered as pain. Alaric closed his eyes, focused on Thessa's heartbeat through the bond. 72 beats per minute, constant, reliable, real, then scent. The magicians released compounds into the air, overwhelming, aggressive, blood and rot and fear pheromones designed to trigger predatory instinct. Alaric's fangs descended, claws extended. Every vampire instinct screamed at him to hunt, to feed, to kill. But he had spent 18 days learning that instincts were not commands. They were information, and he could choose what to do with information. He breathed through his mouth, focused on the clay, on the heartbeat, on the choice to remain still. 5 minutes passed, then 7, then 9. At 9 minutes, 30 seconds, the assault peaked. All three elements combined: sound, light, scent. A deliberate attempt to shatter his concentration. Alaric trembled. His grip on the clay sphere was so tight it cracked. Dust sifted between his fingers. Through the bond, he felt Thessa. Not her heartbeat, her presence, her faith, her absolute certainty that he could survive this. 10 minutes. The magician stopped. The hall fell silent. Alaric opened his eyes. He was still seated, still controlled. Fangs descended but not attacking. Claws out but not destroying. The assembly erupted. Not quite applause, but acknowledgement. The prince had passed. King Obsidian nodded. The council recognizes Prince Alaric as functionally stable. The throne remained secure. Alaric should have felt relief, victory, but he saw Seraphine's expression. She was smiling, slightly, triumphantly. This was not over. Dr. Seraphine Vex stood. The guards moved to stop her, but King Obsidian raised a hand. Let her speak. "Congratulations, Prince Alaric," Seraphine said. Her voice carried perfect warmth, perfect false concern. "I am so pleased to see my methods were successful." Silence fell, confused, questioning. "Your methods?" Thessa stepped forward from the shadows. "You tried to have me removed, called me unqualified." "Because you were implementing techniques incorrectly," Seraphine replied smoothly. "The clay grounding method, the sensory filtering, the focus training, all of these are documented guild practices that I have researched for decades. I attempted to guide you, but you were stubborn, refused proper oversight. I had no choice but to work around your interference." She turned to the assembly. "I present evidence, my research journals, dated entries spanning 20 years, all documenting earth-based grounding techniques for sensory overload." A physician stepped forward, handed documents to King Obsidian. The king reviewed them. His expression darkened. These journals predate Miss Mordain's treatment by years, he said slowly. Exactly, Seraphine purred. The methods that saved Prince Alaric were mine. Miss Mordain simply executed them. Poorly, I might add, hence my attempts at intervention. Thessa went pale. She is lying. I developed this approach independently. My grandmother, Your grandmother was a folk healer with no formal training, Seraphine interrupted. While I sympathize with your rural background, folk medicine is not the same as rigorous guild research. The assembly murmured, politics shifting. If Seraphine could claim credit, she would emerge as the savior of the prince. Her power would be absolute. Thessa would be erased. Alaric stood. Prove it. Seraphine turned to him. My prince, if these are your methods, Alaric said, then demonstrate them. Show the council how you would calm me. Seraphine's smile faltered, just slightly. That is unnecessary. The prince is already stable. Humor me, Alaric pressed. I would like the council to see the technique that saved my life, performed by its creator. King Obsidian leaned forward. An excellent suggestion. Dr. Vex, if you would. Seraphine hesitated, then composed herself. Very well. She approached Alaric. He remained standing. She circled him slowly. Clinical. Assessing. The key, she explained to the assembly, is establishing a steady auditory anchor, a sound the subject can focus on to filter other stimuli. She placed her hand over her heart. My heartbeat, 68 beats per minute, perfectly controlled. Prince Alaric, focus on this rhythm. Let it ground you. Alaric tried, listened to her heartbeat, steady, controlled, clinical, and felt nothing. No anchor, no relief, just another sound in the chaos. Worse, her presence made the sensory overload intensify. Her scent was wrong, artificial. Her heartbeat was mechanical, practiced, empty. His hands began to shake, eyes bleeding red, claws extending. It is not working, he growled. Give it time, Seraphine said, but her voice held an edge, panic disguised as confidence. Step back, Alaric commanded. She did. He felt immediate relief. Her absence calmed him more than her presence. Interesting, Lord Solace said from his seat. The prince appears more stable without your help, Dr. Vex. The technique requires practice, Seraphine insisted. More time. Try with Miss Mordain, Fenris Blackmaw interrupted. The werewolf alpha's voice was granite. Let us see the difference. Seraphine's expression cracked, just for a moment. Fury bleeding through the mask. That is unnecessary. Do it, King Obsidian commanded. Thessa stepped forward. She did not circle, did not assess, simply stood before Alaric, met his eyes, placed her hand over her own heart. The bond flared. Her heartbeat filled his awareness. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present, steady, real. 72 beats per minute, the rhythm that had anchored him for 18 days. The sound that meant safety, trust, understanding. Alaric's breathing slowed, his hands unclenched. The red bled from his eyes, claws retracted. His shoulders dropped as the tension drained away. The transformation was visible, undeniable, absolute. The assembly saw it. 200 witnesses. No way to deny what had just happened. The difference, Lord Solace said quietly, is remarkable. This proves nothing, Seraphine snapped. They have a blood bond. Of course, her heartbeat affects him. That is basic biology, not technique. You are correct, Thessa said. She turned to face Seraphine directly. It is the bond, but not the blood bond. The bond of trust, of 18 days learning to communicate, of him knowing I see him as a person, not a project. She pulled documents from her coat. Cassian's evidence. These are your notes, Dr. Vex, dated from the past 2 weeks. Transcriptions of my methods, copied word for word. Your research journals are fake, backdated after you stole my work. She handed the papers to King Obsidian. Dr. Cassian Gray will testify. He transcribed everything on your orders. Cassian stood from the gallery. It is true, Doctor. Vex has been plagiarizing Miss Mordain's techniques since day one. I have the original documents, time-stamped, witnessed. The king reviewed the evidence. His expression went cold. Ancient. Terrible. Dr. Vex, he said softly, you have been accused of plagiarism, of attempting to murder a royal healer, of treason against the crown. How do you answer these charges? Seraphine's mask finally shattered. Rage poured through. She is nobody, a charity healer with no credentials. No recognition. I have worked for 3 decades to build the guild. I will not let some rural folk witch steal my legacy. So you admit it, King Obsidian said. Seraphine realized her mistake. Too late. The words hung in the air. Confession witnessed by 200. The council has heard enough, King Obsidian declared. Dr. Seraphine Vex, you are found guilty of treason, of attempted murder, of systematic sabotage against a healer who succeeded where you failed. Your sentence is as follows. He stood. The hall fell silent. You are stripped of all guild titles, banned from medical practice permanently. You will be imprisoned for 20 years, and you will watch as Thessa Mordain is elevated to royal physician, as her methods are taught throughout the kingdom, as everything you tried to steal becomes attributed to the woman you tried to destroy. Guards moved forward. Seraphine fought, screamed, "She is nothing. I am Guildmaster. You cannot—" "I am King," Obsidian interrupted, "and you are finished." They dragged her from the hall. Her screams echoed long after she disappeared. Then silence fell. King Obsidian turned to Thessa. "Thessa Mordain, you saved my son. You developed methods the guild could not. You survived assassination attempts and sabotage. I offer you the position of royal physician, with full authority, full resources. Will you accept?" Thessa looked at Alaric. He saw the question in her eyes. This was everything she had never been allowed to have. Recognition, power, authority. But she hesitated. "I did not come to the castle for titles," Thessa said slowly. "I came to help one person who was suffering. That has not changed." "Then help more," King Obsidian replied. "Build an academy, teach your methods, transform how we treat supernatural illness. You have earned this, Miss Mordain." Alaric stepped forward. "You have a choice. That is important. I cannot command you. I can only ask. Will you stay, not as duty, as choice?" Thessa met his eyes, saw vulnerability there, hope, fear. A prince who had learned that asking was stronger than ordering. "I choose to stay," she said, "not for titles, for the woe, and for you." The assembly erupted. Approval, recognition. Thessa Mordain, the healer of last resort, had become the healer who changed everything. King Obsidian raised his hand. Silence fell. He looked at his son, really looked, perhaps seeing him clearly for the first time in months. "I forced your ascension," the king said, each word weighted, difficult. "I did not ask your consent, did not prepare you. I treated you as a tool for the kingdom, not as my son. That was wrong." The admission cost him. Alaric could hear it in the slight tremor of his father's voice. "You taught me something tonight," King Obsidian continued. "That strength is not suppressing weakness. It is acknowledging it, working through it, choosing to build instead of break. You will be a better king than I ever was." For 300 years, King Obsidian had ruled through fear, through power, through the certainty that emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. His son had learned different, and in learning had surpassed him. Alaric bowed, not submission, respect. "Thank you, Father." The council continued late into the night. Treaties signed, alliances formed, but Alaric barely registered it. He sat at the table, clay sphere in his pocket, Thessa's heartbeat in his awareness, and felt something he had not experienced since before the ascension. Peace, not silence, peace. 3 months later, the castle had transformed. The East Wing was no longer a prison. It was an academy, 12 classrooms, treatment rooms, research libraries. Students came from across the kingdom to learn Thessa's methods, to understand that healing was not suppression, but support. Not control, but understanding. Alaric walked through the halls, no longer the broken prince, not quite the perfect heir. Something in between, something real. His chambers were different now. The destroyed furniture replaced, the gouged walls repaired, and everywhere sculptures. Clay work that had evolved from desperate grounding to deliberate art. Thessa sat at the desk reviewing applications for the academy. She looked up as he entered, smiled, real, warm, unguarded. 16 new applicants this week, she said, including 3 from the guild. Apparently, word has spread that folk medicine is worth learning after all. Alaric moved to the window, looked out over the valley. New construction visible in the distance. Free clinics, treatment centers, places where suffering was met with compassion instead of chains. "Dr. Vex's prison cell overlooks the academy," he said. "My father's idea. She spends every day watching her legacy become yours." "That seems cruel," Thessa replied. "It is justice," Alaric corrected. "She tried to erase you. Instead, she is being erased, forgotten, while you are remembered." He turned from the window, pulled something from his pocket, a small box, simple wood, unadorned. "I made something," he said. Thessa opened the box. Inside 2 rings, crafted from black clay, polished smooth, compressed so tightly they resembled stone, each one inlaid with a single thread of silver. "Wedding rings," Alaric explained, "made from the same clay that saved me. That saved you. A reminder that broken things can become beautiful, that destruction can transform into creation." He knelt, not the posture of a prince commanding, a man asking. Marry me, Alaric said, not as healer and patient, not as prince and subject, as two people who found each other in the ruins and chose to build something better. Will you, Shem? Thessa looked at the rings, at this man who had learned gentleness through violence, who had chosen compassion when the world taught him cruelty, who had become whole by admitting he was broken. Yes, she said simply. Alaric slipped the ring onto her finger. She did the same for him. The clay was cool, solid, real. Through the bond, they felt it activate. The rings pulsed with faint warmth, grounding, connecting, two anchors holding each other steady. When is the ceremony? Thessa asked. Whenever you want, Alaric replied. No rush, no pressure. We have time. They stood together at the window. The sun was setting, painting the valley in gold and crimson. The academy lights were coming on. Students moving between buildings, learning, healing, creating. In the distance, barely visible, a single barred window. Seraphine's cell, empty, forgotten, irrelevant. The wedding was small, private, just close allies. Lord Silas attended. Fenris Blackmaw brought a gift, a carved bone that symbolized Pack. Dr. Cassian Gray stood as witness, his own redemption earned through honesty. King Obsidian performed the ceremony. His voice was weaker now, the curse progressing. But he stood tall, proud, watching his son marry a woman who had saved him in ways no healer could measure. Do you, Alaric Corvath, take this woman as your partner? To stand with, not over, to support, not control. I do, Alaric said. The words were a vow, a promise, a choice freely made. Do you, Thessa Mordain, take this man as your partner, to anchor without binding, to heal without fixing? I do, Thessa replied, her voice steady. Sure, certain. Then by the authority of blood and earth I declare you bound, not by compulsion, by choice. Let no one sever what two have willingly joined. They kissed, simple, gentle, real. The bond between them flared bright. Two anchors, two people who had found wholeness in each other. The celebration was quiet, no grand spectacle, just food, music, laughter. The kind of joy that came from surviving something terrible and choosing to build something beautiful from the ruins. That night in their chambers, Alaric sculpted. Thessa watched. They did not need words. The work itself was communication. He created a pair of hands, intertwined, one set strong and clawed, the other delicate and human, holding each other, supporting, grounding, choosing. This is us, he said, monster and healer, weapon and architect, both, together. Thessa touched the sculpture, felt the care in every detail. Not monster, man, not just healer, partner. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that was not empty but full of presence, understanding, peace. Outside the kingdom transformed, slowly, carefully, one healed person at a time. The methods Thessa had developed spread. The idea that power included compassion, that strength included vulnerability, that kings could be built, not born. 6 months after the wedding, King Obsidian died. The curse finally claimed him. His last words were to his son, "Rule better than I did, you already have." Alaric became king, but not the kind his father had been. He ruled from the academy, from the clinics, from the places where suffering was met with care. He made decisions with Thessa beside him, asked instead of commanded, built instead of broke. The kingdom did not collapse. It transformed, became something different, something better. A place where broken things were not discarded but reshaped, where weakness was acknowledged, where asking for help was strength, not failure. And in the center of it all, 2 clay rings, worn smooth from daily touch, grounding 2 people who had learned that true power was not dominating others. It was choosing to create beauty from suffering, choosing to anchor each other through the chaos, choosing every day to build instead of break. Years passed. The academy grew. Students became teachers. Methods spread across continents. The story of the broken prince and the healer of last resort became legend, told to children, written in histories. A reminder that compassion was not weakness, that choosing to help was the strongest thing anyone could do. In a forgotten prison cell, Seraphine Vex watched the world change outside her window, watched the academy expand, watched students learn the methods she had tried to steal, watched her name fade from history while Thessa's blazed brighter. She had wanted legacy, recognition, power. Instead, she got obscurity, irrelevance, the cruelest punishment of all, being forgotten while her victim became unforgettable. The final image of this story is simple. Two people standing in a sculpture garden, surrounded by works of black clay, each piece representing a choice, a moment, a decision to create instead of destroy. Alaric's hands no longer trembling, steady, strong, gentle. Thessa's heartbeat no longer the only anchor, one of many, because Alaric had learned to ground himself, to choose focus, to find strength not in isolation but in connection. They wore their clay rings, touched them absently, habits formed over years, reminders that broken things could become whole, that suffering could transform into beauty, that the strongest bonds were not forced but chosen. They said I was broken beyond repair, Alaric said quietly, that I was weapon, monster, lost cause. And you proved them wrong, Thessa replied, not by becoming perfect, by learning that broken things can still create beauty, that scars can be sculpture, that we choose what we become. Alaric looked at his hands, at the clay staining his fingers, at the rings he wore, at the woman beside him who had taught him that asking for help was not surrender but wisdom. I spent 23 years learning to be a weapon, he said. It took 18 days to learn to be human. Best lesson I ever had. The sun set over the academy, over the kingdom they had built together, over a world slowly transforming. Learning that power without compassion was not strength, that healing meant supporting, not controlling, that the strongest thing anyone could do was choose to help someone suffering, even princes, even monsters, even themselves. This is how a broken prince became a healing king, not by suppressing his pain, by giving it form, by choosing creation over destruction, by finding one person who saw him as more than a weapon and teaching him to see himself the same way. And if you take nothing else from this story, remember this. You are not defined by what breaks you. You are defined by what you choose to build from the ruins. Compassion is not weakness. Asking for help is not failure. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need an anchor and reach out your hand to find one. The clay rings glowed faintly in the sunset. Two people, two anchors, one choice made every day. To build, to heal, to create, to choose each other, to choose hope over despair, beauty over destruction, love over fear. That is the power of being tethered, not bound, not controlled, but connected, grounded, anchored by choice. And that makes all the difference.